A little 5-year-old girl walked into the most exclusive private dinner in all of Manhattan, wearing sneakers that had a small hole in the left toe. And the moment she stepped through those glass doors, a woman wearing a diamond necklace that cost more than most people's houses looked down at that child and did something that nobody in that room was prepared for. She laughed, out loud, right in front of everyone. She pointed at that little girl and said something so cruel, so cold, that the entire room went silent. But what happened next? What that billionaire CEO did when he heard those words, nobody saw it coming. Not his business partners, not the press, not even the little girl's mother, who was standing just a few feet away trying to hold herself together. This story is going to sit with you for a long time. I promise you that. Welcome back, everyone. If you're new here, this channel is the place where we share real, raw, emotional stories that remind you what actually matters in this life. Stories that shake something loose inside you. Stories that make you call your mom or hug your kids a little tighter tonight. And before we get into today's story, I want to ask you something real quick. Where in the world are you watching from right now? Drop your city or your state in the comments. Seriously, I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, what you're about to hear starts in a room full of wealth, power, and perfectly pressed suits, and it ends in a way that absolutely no one in that room ever expected. So get comfortable, because this one is going to take you somewhere. Sometimes the most expensive rooms in the world hold the cheapest hearts, and sometimes the smallest person in the room is carrying more dignity than everyone else combined. His name was Nathan Cole, 34 years old, self-made, born in Dayton, Ohio, to a father who worked double shifts at a tire factory and a mother who cleaned hotel rooms on weekends to make sure Nathan could go to a decent school. Nathan had not forgotten a single day of that. By 28, he had founded a tech logistics company out of a 2-bedroom apartment with a folding table as his desk. By 32, that company, CorePath Technologies, was operating in 9 states and had just crossed the threshold of $1 billion valuation. Forbes had put him on a list. His face had been in magazines. His name was mentioned in the same breath as the biggest movers in Silicon Valley. But if you walked into a CorePath office and didn't know who Nathan Cole was, you would never guess he was the CEO. He held the door open. He knew the coffee preferences of the receptionist. He remembered birthdays. He was the kind of man who made people feel like they mattered because to him, genuinely, they did. In love, though, Nathan had always moved slower than he moved in business. He'd had a serious relationship in his late 20s that ended quietly and painfully. After that, he had focused on the company for years, until 2 years ago, when a mutual friend introduced him to Cassandra Whitfield. Cassandra was 31, polished, beautiful in the way that commands a room. She came from old Connecticut money, the kind of family that had a summer house and a winter house and spoke about both without irony. She was intelligent, quick-witted, socially effortless. She had a way of making Nathan feel like the most interesting person in any room she walked him into. They had been together for 18 months, engaged for 4. The wedding was set for early spring. Tonight's dinner, held at a private event space on the 42nd floor of a Manhattan skyscraper, was their official engagement celebration. 40 guests, private chef, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The kind of event where everything looks like it was designed to be photographed. And somewhere in that glittering world, on the far side of the kitchen corridor, there was Rosa. Rosa Mendez was 44 years old and had worked as the head of facilities management at CorePath's New York headquarters for the past 6 years. In plain terms, she ran the cleaning and maintenance staff. She made sure the building worked. She was quiet, consistent, and deeply trusted. Nathan had promoted her twice, not because she asked, because she deserved it. And he noticed. Rosa's husband, Marco, had passed away 3 years ago from a sudden cardiac event. He was 41. Rosa had been left to raise their daughter alone. That daughter was Lily, 5 years old, with wide dark eyes, 2 uneven pigtails, and a laugh that made strangers on the subway smile without meaning to. Rosa had not planned to bring Lily tonight. She had arranged for her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, to watch Lily during the event. But Mrs. Patterson's own daughter had gone into early labor that afternoon, and the call came 2 hours before Rosa was due at the venue. Rosa had been standing in her kitchen in her work uniform, Lily sitting on the counter eating apple slices, and she had made the only decision she could make. She would bring Lily with her. Keep her in the back. Keep her quiet. No one would need to know. Lily, being 5 years old, had not fully agreed to this plan. By 7:30, the dinner was in full swing. Glasses clinked. Soft string music floated through the air. 40 people in their finest clothes moved through the space like they had been placed there by a set designer. Rosa was working the back corridor, coordinating with the event catering team, making sure the kitchen handoffs were running smoothly. She had set up a little corner for Lily in the staff break room just off the kitchen. She had brought coloring books, a small stuffed rabbit Lily called Bun Bun, and a container of crackers. She had told Lily, very firmly, to stay put. Lily had nodded very seriously, the way 5-year-olds nod when they have absolutely no intention of listening. Somewhere around 8 o'clock, while Rosa was dealing with a linen issue on the far side of the venue, Lily slipped out of the break room. She walked down the short corridor in her light-up sneakers, the ones with the small hole in the left toe, the ones her dad had bought her the Christmas before he died, and she pushed open the door to the main event floor. And she stopped. She stood there in her little jeans and her purple top and her light-up sneakers, and she looked at the room. The chandelier above her was enormous, crystal and gold and light. To a 5-year-old child who had never seen anything like it, it probably looked like something out of a dream. Lily stood very still, head tilted back, mouth open, eyes completely full. To anyone with a heart that was working correctly, it was the most beautiful thing in the room. Cassandra was standing near the edge of the event floor with 3 of her closest friends. Women like her, graceful, confident, laughing easily. They had champagne. They were in the middle of a conversation about something that didn't matter. One of her friends noticed Lily first. She nudged Cassandra with her elbow. Cassandra turned and looked at the little girl in the doorway, and something shifted in her face. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't concern. It was a very specific kind of look. The look of someone who has just spotted something that doesn't belong and doesn't think they need to hide the fact that they think so. She turned back to her friends and said, in a voice that was casual and light and carried just far enough for the people around her to hear, "Is that the janitor's kid? Why is she in here?" One of her friends gave an uncertain smile. Cassandra continued, tilting her head slightly toward Lily without looking at her directly. "Look at those shoes. Someone let the cleaning crew bring their children tonight? This is a private engagement dinner, not a school field trip." A small cluster of people nearby had heard. A waiter paused mid-step. A couple near the dessert table exchanged a glance. A woman who had been laughing at something suddenly found something else to look at. Lily, bless her heart, had no idea. She had spotted the chandelier and was now slowly rotating in a circle to try to see all of it at once, arms slightly out for balance, completely absorbed in her own private sense of wonder. But Rosa heard. She had come around the side corridor just as the last words left Cassandra's mouth. She stopped walking. Her hand, which had been holding a clipboard, went still. She had spent years learning how to absorb things quietly, how to keep her face still when something landed wrong. She had gotten very good at it. But her eyes in that moment said everything that her face refused to show. She moved quickly and softly across the edge of the room, reached Lily, and crouched down beside her. She whispered something in her ear. Lily looked up at her mom, then looked at the chandelier one more time with obvious reluctance, and took her mother's hand. Rosa picked her up, held her close, and turned back toward the corridor. She thought that was the end of it. She thought she would put Lily back in the break room, finish the shift, go home, and swallow this the way she had swallowed so many things over the years. She did not know that Nathan Cole had been standing 14 feet away the entire time. He had stepped away from a conversation to check his phone. He was standing near the edge of the room, partially behind a pillar, when he heard Cassandra's voice. He had listened to every single word, and then he watched Rosa pick up her daughter and walk away with her head down. Nathan stood completely still for a long moment. His phone was in his hand. His jaw was tight. His eyes followed Rosa until she disappeared through the door. Then he turned and looked at Cassandra. She had not seen him yet. She was already moving back into the conversation, laughing at something one of her friends had said, one hand touching her necklace absently. And Nathan felt something happen inside him that he had never quite felt before. Not anger, though there was some of that. Something quieter, something final, like a piece of something clicking into place that he had been trying not to see for a long time. Do you think Nathan should have said something right there in front of everyone? Or do you think he was right to wait? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to know what you would have done. Because here is the thing about moments like this one. They don't always call for the dramatic response. Sometimes the truest, most powerful thing a person can do is move quietly, deliberately, in the direction that actually matters. Nathan did not walk over to Cassandra. He took a slow breath, slid his phone into his jacket pocket, and walked toward the kitchen corridor. He pushed the door open gently. Rosa was inside. She had set Lily down on a chair in the break room doorway and was handing her the stuffed rabbit. Lily grabbed it and immediately began explaining something to it in a very serious voice. Rosa looked up and saw Nathan. Her face did the thing it always did when something unexpected happened in a work setting. It went immediately into a kind of professional composure. But underneath it you could see that she was bracing for something. "Mr. Cole," she said quickly, standing straighter. "I am so sorry. I should never have brought her. My neighbor canceled and I didn't have another option and I thought I could keep her in the back. I promise this won't affect the event. She's going to stay right here. I'll keep the door closed." "Rosa." His voice was quiet. She stopped. He looked at her for a moment. Then he looked at Lily, who had stopped talking to the rabbit and was now looking at Nathan with the kind of full, unfiltered curiosity that belongs only to 5-year-olds and very old dogs. Nathan pulled a stool from the side counter and sat down. In his tuxedo, at his own engagement party. "How long have you been with Corpath?" he asked. Rosa blinked. 6 years, Mr. Cole." 6 years, he repeated quietly. "And in 6 years, have I ever once made you feel like you weren't welcome? Like you or anything about your life was a problem?" Rosa's eyes filled. She shook her head slowly. "Then stop apologizing," he said simply. He looked back at Lily. The little girl was still watching him with those enormous dark eyes. "What's her name?" "Lily." Nathan looked at the little girl directly. "Hi, Lily." Lily stared at him for a very long time. She was clearly conducting some kind of internal assessment. Then she held out the stuffed rabbit toward him, held it directly out in front of her with both small hands, offering it to him the way a child offers you the most important thing they currently own. Nathan's expression did something complicated. He leaned forward and very gently pretended to accept the rabbit, then handed it back. "Thank you," he told her, very seriously. "That's the nicest thing anyone's done for me tonight." Lily pulled Bun Bun back to her chest, satisfied. Then she went back to her very important conversation with the rabbit. Nathan stood. He told Rosa that Lily could stay right there in the break room for the rest of the evening, that there was food in the staff kitchen and she should help herself to whatever Lily needed, that Rosa should stop apologizing. Then he walked back out into the event. Cassandra smiled at him the moment she saw him, that wide, practiced smile that had once made him feel like the luckiest man in the room. She started moving toward him, and Nathan looked at her, really looked at her, and felt the distance between who she was and who he had believed her to be. He had been feeling it for months, that distance. But tonight it had a shape, a voice, a particular sentence spoken with a particular lightness about a little girl in light-up sneakers who had done nothing wrong except exist in the wrong zip code. He made a decision, not in anger, not impulsively, quietly and completely. What do you think Nathan decided to do? Before you keep watching, be honest. If you were standing in his shoes, what would you have done? Would you have ended it right there? Would you have tried to make it work? I think this is the part of the story that reveals the most about a person, not what happened to them, but how they chose to handle it. Nathan did not end the engagement that night. He was not the kind of man who made permanent decisions in the middle of emotional moments. That discipline had served him in business, and it served him here. He gave people the benefit of the doubt. He believed in honest conversations before final conclusions. So, after the guests had filtered out, and the catering team had gone quiet, and the string quartet had packed up, Nathan asked Cassandra to stay. They sat across from each other in the private lounge area of the venue space, the Manhattan skyline behind them, glittering and indifferent. Cassandra had a glass of wine. Nathan had nothing. He sat with his elbows on his knees and his hands loose between them, and he told her, quietly and completely, exactly what he had heard her say about Lily. Cassandra's face moved through several things in quick succession. Surprise, a flicker of something defensive, then a carefully arranged softness. "Nathan, I wasn't trying to be cruel," she said, her voice measured. "I was caught off guard, seeing a child wandering around a private event. I reacted. It came out wrong. She's not just some random kid," he said. "She's Rosa's daughter. Rosa has worked at Corpath for 6 years. She runs the whole facilities operation. She's one of the most reliable people I have." "I know who Rosa is," Cassandra said, and there was a slight edge under the smoothness now. "But she should have arranged proper childcare for an event like this. That's a boundary issue. It puts everyone in an uncomfortable position." "Her childcare fell through last minute," Nathan said. "It was an emergency. Then she should have called and worked it out another way. There are always solutions." Nathan looked at her steadily. "Cassandra, she's 5 years old." She was standing in the doorway looking at the chandelier, and your first response was to comment on her shoes and ask why the cleaning crew's kid was there, in front of other guests. Cassandra set her wine glass down. Her posture straightened slightly. "I think you're making this into something bigger than it is." And there it was. Not a real apology, not genuine reflection, just a smooth, practiced redirect, a way of making Nathan the problem for being bothered by something she genuinely did not believe required bothering about. Nathan sat with that for a long moment. He thought about his mother, about the hotel rooms she had cleaned on weekends so he could eat and study and have a chance, about how she had dressed him as well as she possibly could, and how there had still been years, real years, when things were slightly worn, slightly small, slightly not quite right, and how certain people had noticed, how certain people had made sure he knew they noticed. He thought about what it does to a child, even a very young child, to be pointed at, to be used as a punchline. Those moments land somewhere in kids, even when they can't name what happened. They grow roots. "I'm not making it bigger than it is," he said finally. His voice was completely calm. "But I think we need to be honest with each other before we go any further. I need to know I'm building a life with someone who is fundamentally good, not just impressive, not just smart, not just good at the right moments, actually good at the moments when nobody important is watching." And tonight made me unsure. Cassandra was quiet for a long moment. Something real moved through her face. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I need some time before the wedding. I think we need to be honest about some things that we've both been avoiding." The conversation that followed was long. It was painful. It was honest, genuinely honest, in the way that the most important conversations almost always are. Nathan did not attack her. He did not throw accusations. He talked about what he needed at the core of a partnership, about what he believed about how people deserve to be treated, regardless of their role, their salary, their shoes. Cassandra left that night shaken in a way she had not been shaken before, because she had never before met someone who had everything she valued: status, success, a future, and was genuinely willing to put all of it at risk over a principle, over a 5-year-old girl with a stuffed rabbit and light-up sneakers. Over the following weeks, they tried. To their credit, they both tried. There were more conversations. Cassandra reflected more than Nathan had expected. She was not, at her core, a purely cruel person. She had simply moved through a life where certain things had always been invisible to her, not out of malice, but out of never being required to notice. But somewhere in that reflection, something became clear to both of them. They were not the same kind of people at their foundation. Not where it mattered most. The engagement ended 4 weeks later, quietly, mutually, painfully, honestly. And then something happened that nobody, not even Nathan, had seen coming. Stories travel, not in press releases, not in announcements, in the quiet currents of whisper and connection that move through communities and then, sometimes, outward into the world. People who had been at the event knew what had happened. Staff members talked to other staff members. Someone who had been standing near enough to hear posted a version of it on social media, not naming names, just telling the outline. A few business journalists picked up the edges of it and started asking questions. Nathan declined to comment publicly, as he always did about his personal life. But what no one expected was the response to the story itself. Within 48 hours of a partial version circulating online, Nathan's company received hundreds of messages, not about CorePath, not about the business, about Rosa. People wrote to say they had been in situations like hers, that they had been made to feel small because of where they worked or what they wore or what their children looked like, that the story reminded them of their own mothers, their grandmothers, their aunts who had cleaned and cooked and worked double shifts so someone else could have a better life. They wanted to know if Rosa was okay. Nathan read every single one of those messages, and something settled in him, not satisfaction, not pride, but something quiet and right, like a compass needle finding its direction. He called Rosa into his office on a Thursday morning. This was unusual enough that Rosa was visibly anxious when she arrived. Being called to a formal sit-down with the CEO was outside their normal rhythm, and she had spent the elevator ride up composing herself. She sat across from his desk in her work uniform, hands folded, expression careful. Nathan had a folder in front of him. He slid it across the desk to her. She opened it, and her face went completely still. Inside the folder was a full educational trust, researched, drafted, and set up by Nathan and his legal team, covering Lily's complete education from kindergarten through a 4-year college degree. Whatever school, whatever path, whatever Lily wanted to become, fully funded. In Lily's name. Rosa looked up from the document. Her eyes were full. "Mr. Cole," she whispered. "Why?" Nathan leaned forward slightly. "Because your daughter stood in the doorway of a room she wasn't supposed to be in and looked at a chandelier like it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen in her life," he said. "And I want her to grow up in a world where she gets to see a lot of beautiful things." He paused. "And because she handed me her stuffed rabbit when she didn't even know me. She's 5 years old, and her first instinct was to share what she loved most. That doesn't happen by accident. That comes from how she's being raised." He looked at Rosa directly. "That comes from you." Rosa pressed her hand over her mouth. The tears came, then the kind that have been held back a long time. There was something else in the folder, a document showing that her salary had been increased by 40%, effective the previous week. Full health insurance, medical, dental, vision for both her and Lily. Benefits she had never had. Nathan did not explain it or frame it as a gesture. He had simply arranged it and let the paperwork speak. He did not post about it. He did not call a journalist. He did not mention it at a board meeting or put it in a company newsletter. It was done because it was right. And right things, Nathan had always believed, do not need an audience. Here is the part of this story I think about most. It's not the moment Nathan heard what Cassandra said. It's not the decision he made, or the trust fund, or the salary increase, as meaningful as all of those things were. It's the bread roll. It's the rabbit. It's a 5-year-old girl standing in a doorway in light-up sneakers with a hole in the left toe, staring up at a chandelier like she had just discovered that magic was real. She wasn't in that room because she was supposed to be. She wandered in because she was curious and alive and 5 years old. And in that moment, the most expensive room in Manhattan had 2 kinds of people in it. People who looked at her and saw something out of place, and one person who looked at her and saw a child, just a child, with wide eyes and a stuffed rabbit and the instinct to share. Here is what I believe. How you treat someone when there is absolutely nothing to gain from treating them well That is the truest thing about you. That is not your performance. That is your character. It doesn't matter what the setting is. It doesn't matter who else is watching. It doesn't matter what the person is wearing, or where they work, or how much money their family has. How you treat the people who cannot do a single thing for you, that is who you are. Nathan Cole knew that. He had learned it in a house where the lights were sometimes uncertain and the shoes were sometimes a little too small. He had never needed to unlearn it because he had never let himself forget where it came from. And Lily is going to grow up. She's going to go to school. Maybe she'll study medicine or engineering or art or law or something that nobody has invented yet. She's going to become someone. She won't remember that night in any detail. She was 5. The memory will fade. But somewhere in her, in the way her mother talks about the people who were kind, in the way she was raised to offer her most precious thing to a stranger without hesitation, somewhere in there, that night will live. And that chandelier? She's going to see a lot of beautiful things. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And before you go, tell me in the comments, who in your life has shown you the kind of goodness that doesn't need an audience? The kind that just quietly does the right thing and moves on? I'd love to hear about them. Because those people, the quiet ones, the consistent ones, the ones who hold the door and remember the names and notice the children in the doorway, they are the ones who actually change things. One small, unhurried, invisible moment at a time. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.